This is where we left in the previous video by installing React Query and configured it successfully. So how are we going to use it? For React Query, we are going to use only two APIs or hooks. One API is to make post, delete, or update request. And this is what we call mutation in React Query. And to fetch some data, we are going to use what is called use queries. And since we are going to create a post, we are going to use the mutation. And this is the rule for mutation. One is that we are going to create a function. And that function is responsible to make the HTTP request. But that function must return a promise, so that use mutation will resolve it and give us the response from the API. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to create a folder for it. So inside the SRC, I'm going to create a folder called API Services or just Services. And then inside, I'm going to have subfolders. Let's begin with the post. So inside here, I'm going to make use of post API.js. Alright, so here we are going to create a function that must return a promise. So here we will need what is called Axios. So import Axios from Axios. And the function goes like this. Remember, we are going to create multiple functions for the post API. So the post API file is responsible anything about post, either to create, fetch, delete, or update. So let's begin with the first one, and that is the creation of a post. So I will say const create post API, and you can name it whatever you want, which is equal to async function call. And here we go. So let's bring in Axios.post method. And here we're going to provide our backend API. In this case, this one. So I'm going to copy this. And then back here, I'm going to provide what is called base URL as const base-URL. And I'm going to assign to this. So in here, we're going to provide the base URL as the first argument. And then as a second argument, going to be the data that we want to send to the server. So here, we will say post data here, and comma, I'm going to provide the post data as that. Awesome. So let's assign to a variable as await. And I will say const response is equal to that. And we are going to return a promise. Therefore, we're going to use return and then provide res.data. Anytime you make use of return inside a function or inside a asynchronous function, it means that we are returning a promise. So we are done with the function to create the post. So here I will say create post API. So how are we going to use it? Well, let's get back to the creation of the post component, which is this. And let me collapse the form handler here, and up here I'm going to make use of post mutation. And let's bring in the use mutation from React Query as that. And here as a function call, I'm going to provide only one argument, and that is object. And inside, I'm going to specify two properties. The first one is going to be mutation key. And this key is going to be used by React Query for caching. And for this, you can use any key of your choice, but it must be unique. So I will say create post. Second property is going to be the mutation function. And the function is this one. which is create post API. So let me assign to that, and here we go. So here I'm going to assign to what is called post mutation, which is equal to that. Now, when you call this function, we're going to pass in the values that we are getting from the form to the API. Alright, so let's try out. So inside the submit here, instead of console logging the values, we are going to pass this value to the post mutation. So here we go. We're going to use post mutation dot mutate and then pass in the values. Alright, let's go ahead and console log the post data here, and let's see. Let me open the console and let me enter something like Node.js. I believe we're gonna have an error, but let's try out. And I will say description and create. Now let's see, we have this beautiful error, and that is access to this is being blocked by course. This error simply means that we are trying to access our server by using a different route or endpoint, meaning that this URL is not trusted because we don't want any server or request to access our API. So if we want to grant our React application access to the backend, unless we tell our backend that, hey backend, this React application is reliable, it is from us, so grant the access to use the server. So how are we going to tell our server to grant an access to this? Let's continue in the next video.